Good evening, class. My name is Whitney, and for my Harlem Renaissance project, I am presenting Countee Cullen, an American poet, novelist, playwright, and Harlem Renaissance activist. Early life. Born Countee Leroy Porter on May 5th in 1903 to Elizabeth Lucas. The city in which he was actually born is still unknown. Records show Baltimore, Maryland, New York City, New York, and Louisville, Kentucky. Countee claimed New York City, New York, and Louisville, Kentucky on legal applications. Because there weren't a lot of documentations back in the day, they can't really specify the exact birthplace. Brought to Harlem by Amanda Porter, who is believed to be his paternal grandmother, at age 9. Amanda Porter raised him until her death in 1917. Countee Cullen was adopted by Reverend Frederick Cullen and his wife, and that's where he adopted the last name Cullen. He was around age 15, and although there is no legal documentation showing that this adoption was official, he still looked up to Reverend Frederick as a father figure, and the Reverend and his wife treated him as their child. He went on to go to DeWitt Clinton High School, where he excelled academically and started to write poetry. He won citywide contests for poems and became an editor for the student weekly newspaper. Education. In 1922, he graduated from DeWitt Clinton, and at the time, he was elected vice president of his senior graduating class. He was in honors society and graduated with honors in French, Greek, Latin, and mathematics. After high school, he attended New York University, and at this time, his first poem was published in Opportunity magazine. He then entered Harvard in 1925, where he finished with his master's in English in 1926. Now, in 1923, Cullen had won second place in Witter Bryner's undergraduate poetry contest. First place went to Langston Hughes, who later became one of Cullen's good friends and also a writer, activist for the Harlem Renaissance. Cullen, under the leadership of W.E.B. Du Bois, became one of the golden exemplars of a new political culture leader and became the new image for Black Americans. Cullen went on to marry Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois' daughter, Yolanda Du Bois. At the time, the Harlem Renaissance was made up of young African American writers confronting history's oppression and shaping a new voice for Black Americans. Cullen wanted poetry to surpass race and bring everyone together. He wanted to be known as a poet and not just as a Negro poet. It says that his style of writing influenced by romantics, and he studied subjects in love, romance, and religion. As I was doing research on him, he did a lot of studies, not just in African American literature, but also of European, Latin literature, and things like that. It does say that he was of possible mixed race, so I think that's where his interest in studying all different races and literature brought him to believe that, we can surpass race and bring everyone together. In the life of Countee Cullen, after only 2 years of marriage, he divorced Yolanda Du Bois and later met Alan Lockley, and he began to introduce him to gay affirming material. And it was said by Cullen that at that point he started to come to terms with his sexuality. Although at the time he was still unsure of his sexuality. Many say that that is what brought his divorce on. Although there is no proof that he has had any sexual relations with men, it is stated that he had relationships with men, and one of those men being Edward Atkinson. In the mix of being unsure and with gay men being in the closet at that time, Cullens went on to marry Ida Robertson. During this time, his work had started to diminish, and he began to work as a French teacher at Frederick Douglass High School. He did go on to write children's literature, and he also went on to write plays. He worked with other writers of the Harlem Renaissance as well, and up-and-coming writers for the new modern Negroes. Some of the work that he had began, he had inspired to put on Broadway. He stayed married to Ida until his death in 1946. At this time, some of his work was then published to Broadway, but unfortunately, he was unable to see this through because of his death that happened in 1946. They said from uremia and complications to high blood pressure. Here I listed some of his work that was published. My Soul's High Song, the collected writing of Countee Cullens. On These I Stand, The Lost Zoo, The Black Christ and Other Poems, The Ballad of a Brown Girl, which was a really good one. That's one of his earlier publishes. As you can see, it was 1927. That's around the time that he had graduated from college. Also, the same with Color, which was after high school and his first year going into college at New York University. One Way to Heaven, and My Lives and How I Lost Them. One of his really big poems that is not listed up there was Incident, and I saved this one because this is one of the ones that I analyzed for the project. There was a few questions that asks, does the poem utilize stock characters, and does it utilize figurative language? And in this poem, you won't hear anything of the stock characters, but you will notice figurative language throughout the poem, and it does incorporate an element of the African American literature tradition. Once riding in old Baltimore, heart filled, head filled with glee, I saw a Baltimorean kept looking straight at me. Now I was 8 and very small, and he was no whit bigger. And so I smiled, but he poked out his tongue and called me a nigger. I saw the whole of Baltimore from May until December. Of all the things that happened there, that's all that I remembered. So he was this young black boy excited to visit Baltimore, innocent, and he faced the cruel reality of racism from someone just as young as himself. It was almost as if Cullen believed that he was miles away from racism, and he was just completely shocked to see that it exists everywhere and not just where he was from, even as small as 8 years old. He stated how he has seen all of Baltimore, but all of the things that happened there, that's all that he could remember. It kind of indicated that the incident was so traumatic for him that it left his mark and overshadowed everything good that pretty much happened along that trip for him. And that's actually pretty sad. Another question was, how is the writer perceived today? And Countee Cullen is perceived as an important figure of the African American art movement known as the Harlem Renaissance. That's my presentation, and thank you for your time.